All right. Welcome, everybody, to the next episode of the Baseball is Cool podcast. I'm joined today by Tony Wolfe, who you probably know from Fangraphs. I'm sure even if you don't think you know Tony from Fangraphs, you do. You've read his stuff there. If you're a baseball fan and for some reason not reading Fangraphs, which I assume all of you are, you should be reading Fangraphs. If you can go support Fangraphs with a membership, go do that. It's the place I go to for most of my baseball coverage. All the stats that I talk about on the podcast or other videos on the channel. Fangraphs is generally where I get it from. Tony also writes about the Cincinnati Reds on Red Reporter, which is an SB Nation blog. You can find him on Twitter at @Tony Wolfe _. There's an E on the end of Wolf. And tonight we're going to be talking about the Cincinnati Reds and also just the NL Central in general heading into the 2021 season. Before we do that, Tony, I'm not going to ask how you're doing. I'd much rather pose a question to you about pizza. First of all, do you like pizza?
I love pizza. I had pizza for dinner tonight. It's a very topical question that you started with.
Okay. Well, my question is, anytime you had pizza for the rest of your life, you could only have 2 toppings on it, what would they be?
So my go-to would usually be either pepperoni and banana peppers or like sausage and banana peppers. I'm very into that. But the pizza that we got tonight, that we usually get from this place here in town, is a chicken and bacon Gouda pizza, which
sounds amazing.
That's a lot more fancy than I usually go with pizza. I'm usually like the cheapest frozen pizza that I can get out of the box is what I'm going for. But the chicken and bacon on pizza is really, really great.
Yeah, you're real close to my wheelhouse with all that, because I think my answer would, we also generally do like whatever store brand frozen pizza because it's easy and it's $5 if we're not like getting good pizza from a local place, which sounds like you did tonight. But if I had to pick 2 toppings, I'd go chicken and banana peppers. Easy.
Yeah, that's a good call. So, banana peppers is always a great decision.
Yeah, I can switch up the meat or even like another veggie with the banana peppers. But banana peppers, it's strange because I don't really eat them on much of anything else other than subs or pizza, but they're essential for me on both.
Yeah, no, I'm feeling the exact same way.
All right, we're off to a great start here. We're off to a real great start. So I wanted to have you on to talk about the NL Central, particularly the Reds. They're the team we're going to talk about the most because selfishly they're the team that I like talking about the most in the NL Central. I think that started for me with an appreciation for watching Luis Castillo pitch within the last 2 to 3 seasons. He went from a guy who I just kind of knew as a pitcher for the Reds to a guy now I want to watch the Reds every time he pitches. So to start, I'd kind of like to tell you, as a baseball fan who doesn't necessarily follow the Reds closely and definitely doesn't write about them, like where I am with the Reds, and then get your take on kind of how you see them entering the 2021 season. I'm having trouble getting that out. 2021 you can't go too quick with it.
Yeah.
And one reason I was drawn to the Reds, I think last season, is because they were a team that looked like they were actually trying to win, right? Like, which is saying something in baseball these days when that's not the case with lots of teams. A lot of teams are fine being an 85-win team and hoping they get the breaks and profiting more off a lower payroll. I think the Reds, their trade for Bauer in the 2019 season was them starting to like kind of gear up for the 2020 season. And then 2020, I mean, it wasn't a dud, but it wasn't great. It was only 60 games. They snuck into the postseason and then their 2 playoff games were definitely duds. And now coming into this season, there's not much excitement around them. I think maybe, while they didn't do things to generate buzz, I think the pieces that they still have there are interesting and are a decent team. Where are you at with the 2021 Reds, and is my perception of them far off?
Your perception is pretty accurate. I alternate on where I am with the Reds on a day-to-day basis, sometimes hour to hour, because it took a really great run in the last 2 weeks of the regular season in 2020 for them to even get into the playoffs. Then they get shut out by the Braves, and I think it was 22 total offensive innings without a run in the NL Wildcard Series, and that was it. They were done. And from that team, they've not added to it in any real meaningful way, and they have shed two of the better relievers from that team, as well as the best offensive catcher and the most competent major league shortstop from that roster. So that doesn't set you up particularly well for 2021. At least it doesn't inspire optimism, certainly in any kind of fan base. But the more you look at this team, you do remember that the offense coming into 2020 was supposed to be pretty good. And a lot of as far as that offense goes, a lot of the main pieces from that are still around. You're going to have Joey Votto at first base. Mike Moustakas and Eugenio Suarez are going to be at second and third, and then your outfield is going to be some combination of Jesse Winker, Nicholas Castellanos, Shogo Akiyama, and Nick Senzel. That sounds like an offensive group that has a lot of potential, right? Nick Senzel hasn't really hit up to where he was billed to as a prospect yet. We've just started to see Jesse Winker break out in the last season. Mike Moustakas battled some injuries and was never really quite 100%, and he still managed to be above average. Joey Votto's gotten weirdly streaky over the last couple of years and a little bit harder to predict than he was for so many years before. But as far as that whole group looks, it's the same group that was supposed to help them get to the playoffs last year, with the help of a really stellar rotation and a really deep group of arms in the bullpen. So, on any given day, I can talk myself into the Reds being right there at the top of the NL Central division race, right next to the Cardinals, right next to the Cubs, right next to the Brewers. Other days, I can talk myself into them being the third worst team in the National League. It's the way the certain players were disappointing last season, combined with the off season of shedding payroll, has really put them in a strange position where you're not really sure where they're going to go.
Yeah, and they seem to, like you said, the pieces that they lost and didn't really replace them. They kind of seemed, after the offseason before, of stepping out from that kind of approach that it seems like most teams are doing these days, that I mentioned earlier, of like, let's just try to win 80 to 85 games and get some breaks and get to 90 wins and sneak into the postseason. Mm-hmm. They went back to that. They kind of fell back into that kind of team, right? Mm-hmm. Like you're saying, there's still a lot to like. I think the bats, obviously, that you mentioned are still there. And I think even without Bauer, like, the rotation, especially with the way the Reds sometimes tweak pitchers and develop pitchers, and I don't even mean just develop minor leaguers, but help major league players play into strengths more. I think the pitching staff could still be a major strength. And like I said, Luis Castillo, as a baseball fan, like, if people should watch him, because his changeup, I think it was third in the league last year in swing strike rate on any pitch. I think I don't remember what the percentage was, but it was the third best whiff rate in the majors. I'm interested on him and both Molly, who I guess is coming in as probably the number 3 starter, I guess, behind Castillo and Gray. For both of them, I'm kind of interested in, that Castillo has a track record, but he built upon that last year, I felt like, whereas Molly was more like, oh, we might actually have something here kind of thing. But for both those guys, I wonder, like, okay, there was 60 games versus 162. And also, you were playing in the NL Central and you were only playing the AL Central, right? on the other side. So if those guys, if Castillo and Molly are who they were last year for a full season, like that rotation with Sonny Gray in there too, that top three is going to be great. I guess how much hope do you put in Castillo and or Molly being those guys that they were last season over a full season with a regular schedule?
Yeah, I'm pretty optimistic about both of them. And you figured Castillo, his first year in the majors, he showed so much potential, right? He had that high 90s fastball. He had that changeup. It wasn't fully formed yet. That changeup, I think he only really picked that up over his last year in the minors, or like somewhere very recently before his major league debut. So that was still a little bit of a work in progress. He was still his slider was very fringy at the time, and you saw the potential there. And then over the next couple of years, he continued to show those flashes while also, still ironing things out. There was a time when he really was, especially when he was in the minors, he threw a lot of strikes, almost to a fault, where he was trying to just get it by guys in the zone, and advanced hitters could catch up to him. He was a little bit homer prone. He wasn't able to get as many swings and misses and strikeouts as he could have if he'd ventured outside the zone. And then, seemingly right on top of that, he started getting out of the zone way too much. And all of a sudden his walk rate started to go up quite a bit. And he wasn't, now he was getting himself into trouble where he might not be getting hit quite as hard, but now he's at 75 pitches in the fourth inning of every start he makes, and he's struggling to get through games and get through a lineup, towards the end of the second or third time. And last year, it really looked like he finally put everything together. He was able to get hitters to chase. He was able to, his sequencing just keeps getting better and better. Derek Johnson, the pitching coach, has really hammered it home with him, and as far as using his changeup and using it aggressively. The Reds catchers will call for that pitch in any situation because he might have a 98, 99 mile-an-hour fastball, but the changeup is the weapon. And even when guys expect it, they're not able to catch up to it. So, or not able to get a bat to it. So that's been really important for him. Tyler Mahle, I'm also pretty optimistic, and just because he's even as a really young pitcher, again, when he was first coming up, his just baseball IQ and his knowledge of pitching, his comfort on the mound was really apparent. And he again had to work through some obstacles when he was first in the majors, because he first came up and he had a slider and I think it was a changeup that were just terrible. I mean, his fastball was, in the mid 90s, but he just could not fool anybody with his secondary stuff. Then he replaces that with a curveball in 2019, and he starts throwing like a curveball and a cutter, and changes and alters his changeup a little bit, and he has a little bit more success. And then 2020 rolls around, Reds have a completely overhauled pitching, coaching staff, infrastructure, all that. And now he's not only got the slider back, but he's now throwing a little bit harder. He has a lot more spin than he did a couple years ago. And so you can see all of these pieces starting to come together. And, for a guy who already, he threw a no-hitter in a perfect game when he was in the minors. He already had really good stuff. He really knew how to pitch before he got to the majors, but I think his stuff has progressed enough now that he's given himself more margin for error where he doesn't have to be so pinpoint with everything. He doesn't have to worry about aiming his pitches so precisely. He can just go out and throw a little bit more and be a little bit more loose with what he's trying to do, and that makes it really exciting when you see a guy like that who can command his stuff the way he can, who has as much poise and mound presence as Tyler Mahle does. When you see him improve his stuff the way he has.
Yeah, and their pitching staff and like their approach to pitching and their pitching development program at the major league level even is really one of the reasons that I find them really interesting as a team. Mm-hmm. But I guess out of the bullpen, what they lost Iglesias, Bradley's not back. I mean, he wasn't with them the whole year, but two big pieces they lost. What they brought in, Doolittle, right? And I guess my question is about the bullpen. Like, is there enough there? Do they have guys there where they're going to like pull a Mahle and they're going to be like, well, this dude has the raw skills and we're going to do these tweaks and all this, and we're actually going to have a really good bullpen, and people don't realize it. Am I missing something in thinking that the bullpen is not sufficient here?
No, the bullpen, I think that's going to be really interesting to watch this season because, on paper right now, the bullpen doesn't look like it's going to be enough because of the fact that, you lose Raisel Iglesias, you lose Archie Bradley. Those are guys who've been closing games for the last few years. Now you could have had them in this bullpen and for not a ton of money, really,
right?
And they let them go. And this was a really, really strong relief market, both at the top with guys like Liam Hendricks and Brad Hand and Trevor May, but then the depth of 7th and 8th inning guys, like really quality arms on the market this winter. I mean, it was just tremendous how much talent was out there, and they mostly stayed away from it. As far as guys with proven major league stuff, Sean Doolittle has been brought in. He's somebody that has lost some fastball velocity over the last couple of seasons. Doesn't really seem to have the stuff, at least from what we saw last year, that he did when he was a really elite reliever. Noe Ramirez came back in the Raisel Iglesias trade. Mm-hmm. He's fine, but he's not Raisel Iglesias and shouldn't be expected to be. And beyond that, you've got Amir Garrett, you've got Lucas Sims, and both of them are going to be really good. And after that, it is a really, really long list of guys who you can talk yourself into, but don't necessarily have a super long track record, or at least have one or two red flags. Cambridge Rosian is another guy who came over from the Angels who has really good stuff, has very has a very unique arsenal, and was kind of fell to the Reds on a minor league deal because he has had his velocity taper off a little bit in recent seasons, just like Sean Doolittle. They traded for Jeff Hoffman from the Rockies. They went out and traded for Sionel Perez from the Astros. They have a few guys that they can call up from the minors, and they have gone out and targeted all of these guys in either trades or on minor league deals who are probably, the way you look at it right now, are probably on the fringes of the major league roster. I wouldn't sit here and, make any bets on any of those guys, any specific one of those guys getting major league roster spot out of spring training, but any of them could. And it just depends on what the coaching staff does with them, what they think that they see in those arms that is going to lend itself to a lot of success in the majors. I trust at this point the Reds pitching staff, coaching staff as much as I do, nearly anybody else in the majors in terms of their ability to identify talent and get the most out of those arms. But at the same time, it would have been nice to see them go out and sign somebody like Trevor May, or sign even an Alex Colomé, or somebody in that tier. They're just because there were so many of those guys available, and those are the kinds of guys who you like to build up a little bit of quantity of them, because once you get into the July, August, and September part of your schedule, you're going to be really happy that you stockpiled a bunch of those arms.
Yeah, no, I mean, I also want to give them the benefit of that. Well, I don't want to speak for you to say you're giving them the benefit of the doubt, but in that I kind of like think their pitching approach and, the whole let's drive line this up type of approach, I want to give them the benefit of the doubt and say, well, the bullpen is definitely somewhere where you can save money. And if maybe they've identified guys, and that's why they brought in guys like Hoffman and Ramirez, because they've identified things with them like, well, these dudes are going to be, this much better with us once we work with them and blah, blah, blah. But, it was disappointing to see them not go out and add like a not all that expensive arm or two just to have more depth in that bullpen. But
yeah. Well, I mean, you look at a guy like TJ Anton, who came up with them last year, was throwing, in the low 90s in the minors for most of his career. He's sort of a late blooming guy. He's in his mid 20s already. Made his debut last year and had shown up to camp after working with the Reds' new pitching instructors a little bit. Showed up to camp thrown in the mid 90s and had electric stuff. All of a sudden, had a ton more spin on his pitches than he did previously, and was outstanding last year. And now he might be a bullpen guy. He might be in the back of the rotation. It kind of depends on how guys like Lorenzen and Wade Miley shake out, trying to vie for rotation spots. But he looks like a really talented arm that they're going to lean on in big situations for the next few years. And he's a guy who wasn't really on anybody's radar a couple years ago. So, that's an example of somebody who didn't inspire a whole lot of confidence before last year, and suddenly looks like a really crucial arm. So that's why you give this team a little bit of benefit of the doubt, and thinking, one or two of these, 6 or 7 pitchers that they've gone out and acquired this winter on minor league deals or on or with trades for players to be named later or whatever, any of these arms that they've acquired on minor deals, if 1 or 2 of those guys pans out, that's going to be a big success. And I think this is the kind of organization that's capable of putting that together.
Yeah, and switching to the other side of the ball, so to speak. One area where I really have trouble giving them the benefit of the doubt is whatever the heck their plan is at shortstop. I mean, I'm a Baltimore Orioles fan, and the Baltimore Orioles did more to shore up their shortstop, actually with somebody the Reds are familiar with Freddie Galvis. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's with the amount of shortstops that were on the market this offseason and the quality of shortstops and the varying degree, pick a tier. What tier do you want to go from here? And they did nothing. And I know they've got Garcia coming up, but other than his stint up last year, he's never been above high A ball, right? And then I guess Kyle Farmer is maybe part of the plan. Do you think they just got boxed out of all their different plans, or do you think they really just chose not to address their shortstop situation?
Yeah, the Orioles, this will be the second straight year where their starting shortstop will have come directly from Cincinnati, which isn't that's not a plan I would recommend to anybody, but it worked out great for Jose Iglesias. So
Yeah.
maybe Freddie Galvis is going to win the batting title this year. I don't know. But yeah, I think it's weird because I think if you asked the Reds at the start of the calendar year 2020 if they planned on adding a proven major league shortstop before the 2021 season started, they could have honestly told you yes, right? Because of not only because of the free agent market that was coming up with Marcus Semien, Andrelton Simmons, Didi Gregorius for his second offseason in a row. Guys like that were going to be available on the market, and then you were also going to have Francisco Lindor, who the Reds had been trying to at least passively had been negotiating a deal with Cleveland for since back in like 2018, I think. Trevor Story was at least going to be mentioned on the trade market. Guys like Carlos Correa, Corey Seager, Javier Baez, who were going to be less easy to pull away from their teams, they were going to be entering their last year of team control, were probably going to at least be mentioned when you pick up the phone and call one of those teams. So the Reds, there were so many possible avenues for the Reds to go to upgrade their situation at shortstop before this season. And I think going into 2020, they very much planned to. And then the pandemic hit, and you couldn't get a single fan into Cincinnati for the 2020 season. There's no telling how much money that they lost. They obviously aren't going to say, or how much money they simply, failed to make, however you want to put that. But all of a sudden, the financial situation at the end of 2020 was in a place that nobody could have predicted 12 months prior. And so they still said at the start of this winter that they planned on upgrading at shortstop. Sitting here now, I have my doubts that was ever really part of the plan, because if you look at what guys like Marcus Semien and Andrelton Simmons got in terms of their contracts, and even Didi Gregorius, they all, I believe Semien and Simmons both got 1-year deals. I might be mistaken on that, but I know that I know the annual value, what they're making in 2021. All three of those guys did not sign for that much money. All
Right.
of those contracts would have been affordable for maybe a little bit more than what you paid Trevor Bauer for his last year of arbitration in 2020, and you're not paying Bauer anymore. So I mean, they definitely would have had it in the budget otherwise to add those guys. I have a hard time imagining that their situation is so dire that they literally couldn't afford to do that this winter. Right. But the fact is that they didn't. Instead they went out and they got Kyle Holder from the Yankees, who I don't think he's played above AA ball, and he is a good defender at shortstop, but doesn't have much value in his bat. D. Strange Gordon is here now on a minor league deal, and he's said that he is going to be a shortstop this year, even though he hasn't played shortstop in 5 or 6 years in the big leagues. Kyle Farmer was their starting shortstop in Game 1 of the wild card series last year, and started at shortstop several other times. And he can handle that position, but by no means should he be in line to start there on any team that considers itself a contender. Right. It's really frustrating that they could not be bothered to add anything beyond what they got at shortstop, and that's going to be a really significant hole this season. Especially given how much they really needed. They really needed to shore up the offense more this winter. Based on not just 2 games of the playoffs last year, although of course based on that, but also the way that they hit overall. They were their peripherals, their expected stats were better than their actual production allowed for. but they still weren't great. They still weren't up to expectations. And so this is a team that doesn't have a star player. They don't have a Nolan Arenado or a somebody like that that plays on another NL Central team that you can count on being a 5 or 6 or 7 WAR player for this season. They're going to rely on their depth to stockpile, to accumulate value that way, instead of it just being one guy. So you need, when you've got that kind of plan, you need as many hands on deck as you can get. And going into a season saying we're going to alternate between a backup catcher and a double-A shortstop as like our main plans at that position, that's just not going to do it.
Yeah, and your point about there not really being like a true superstar on this team. I mean, if you go look at like projections on Fangraphs, look at Zips, and other than shortstop, there's not really a black hole on the team. Like everywhere, they're pretty much projected like in most positions in the teens somewhere, right? To have like the 15th. I think Suarez in the third base situation is projected to be the 13th best third base in terms of projected WAR, I think, from Zips. And they have a bunch of guys like that, like Moustakas and Castellanos and all these guys who are solid players, but not stars. The one guy who's really interesting to me is Jesse Winker, who I assume will get, I guess I shouldn't assume because of his platoon splits at times in his career, will play left field a lot, right? Last year, he remained healthy. I think part of that was he played a good bit of DH. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think he did, yes. Right?
Yeah.
So he was finally healthy. But I mean, man, like his StatCast page, man, it's all red ink. Like, the dude rips the ball. Now, unfortunately, there's no DH this year, so both him and Castellanos will be in the corner outfields trying to not drive down their value too far out there with the glove. But I guess, do you force, if there's somebody on this team who I guess could kind of elevate their game to a next level on offense, would you agree, I guess, if I said, I think that guy's Winker, who could become kind of not a superstar, but a star level player?
Yeah, I think as far as I think if you're looking for a breakout hitter for 2021, it would probably be Senzel, just because of his pedigree and
Sure.
the potential and what he's shown in the past. But as far as guys who have actually shown evidence for that at the major level, that would be Winker. Yeah, I mean, Winker, it was definitely under the radar last year because it was a shortened season. He didn't really have a chance to accumulate a lot, a big number of home runs or WAR, walks, some of those counting stats. But he was a really well regarded offensive prospect for this organization for years before he debuted, and last year was the best he's ever looked. If there was ever a knock against him, it was going to be that you questioned how much power was in his bat, because he had wrist injuries in the minors that really limited his slugging percentages over the years. He always looked like he was going to have sort of a Joey Votto-ish eye at the plate. That's just the easiest hop to make, given the team he played for. But it always looked like he was going to hit for average. It looked like he was going to walk 12% of the time. He wasn't going to strike out a bunch. You just wondered if he was ever going to hit for power. And then last year he hit for a ton of freaking power. Yeah, I mean, he was in something like the 90th percentile in exit velocity. He hit a lot of balls in the air. I mean, he looked like a slugger who could still take walks and still rack up a high batting average. So he was really, really damn impressive. So I would be really I am really looking forward to seeing him hit for a full season again, health permitting. He has dealt with injuries. As you said, his platoon splits against lefties have been really poor in the past. But I think last year he hit something like a 130 WRC plus against lefties, something like that. So if those platoon splits are really behind him, and he is able to at least not be a complete black hole in left field, that would be he could be a really valuable player and somebody that they've still got a chance to have around for a few more years yet.
Yeah, he's an interesting player. He's somebody who personally in the main dynasty league I play in fantasy baseball, like 2 to 3 years ago, I was trying to trade for him because I was like, man, if this guy stays healthy and figures out against lefties, there's value there. I think that ship might have sailed after his 2020 season. But so the odds makers, I believe, put the over under on the Reds at 81.5. What are you taking on him?
See,
over or under? Yeah,
it's going to be, man. I think sitting here now, I think it'll be under.
Okay.
Because of because you're if you're taking the over on them, you can certainly talk yourself into that. Mm-hmm. But I think you're asking a lot from the back of the rotation, which is pretty uncertain right now. Sonny Gray and Luis Castillo at the top have both been in the Cy Young conversation over the last 2 seasons now for a lot of the time. I have a lot of faith in Tyler Mahle. Are TJ Antone, Michael Lorenzen, and Wade Miley going to be super effective in the back of the rotation? I don't know. Are they actually going to get a bunch of pop-up breakouts in the bullpen? I don't know. I think that the projections on guys like, I think Nicholas Castellanos and Votto and Moustakas, I think they're all projected for less than a win and a half on Fangraphs. I think those are probably a little light, but maybe not. Maybe Castellanos is a league average hitter who is the worst defensive right fielder in baseball again. And guys like Votto and Moustakas, who are in their mid to late 30s now, continue to regress. Senzel doesn't break out, and this could get a little ugly offensively. So it could really go either way. If we were sitting here at the start of October and the Reds are coming off an 89 win season, I would not be surprised by that. If they're coming off a 69 win season, I also wouldn't be surprised by that. It's going to depend on a lot of really, really fickle players breaking in certain directions.
Yeah. I kind of feel similarly about them, and it just, for a team that didn't do much to the bullpen and didn't do anything at shortstop, et cetera, it's hard to believe that everything's going to go right for them. But it's easy to see how everything could go right for them with guys like Castillo and Mahle and and Winker and Senzel and all that. Like if things break right with those guys, like, oh yeah, shoot, like this is a great team. But also you might not have a bullpen and you probably don't have a shortstop. So you might also, like you said, be well below 500, which I think is kind of like how I feel about most of the NL Central, maybe not to the degree of the Reds, but there's not like a powerhouse team here. Just to move around the Central real quick, the Brewers, I think, like the icing on the cake of me, I guess, thinking of them, the favorite was bringing in Jackie Bradley Jr., adding like a fourth legitimate piece to that outfield. Then they now have more depth, more flexibility when Yelich, Kane, et cetera, go down with injuries or just days off, and Bradley can play all over the outfield. And then they added Colton Wong at second base, which is a huge upgrade defensively over basically anybody in the league. Where are you at on the Brewers coming into the season?
Yeah, the Brewers, I think, are in a similar position to Cincinnati, where they have the guys at the top of their rotation are really good. Brandon Woodruff and Corbin Burns, I think, could be really, really strong pitchers over the course of a full season in 2021. They have the potential to have a really good rotation top to bottom, but the guys at the back end, like Josh Lindblom, Eric Lauer, guys like that are a little bit, you're a little bit fuzzier on. The bullpen is obviously has two absolute monsters at the back end, but a lot of the rest of the arms there, you're kind of wondering if you're more relying on the Brewers' own really solid pitching infrastructure to work some magic there. And I wouldn't call the Brewers favorites just because I don't know how much they're going to hit.
Sure.
Outside of Keston Hiura, Colton Wong and Jackie Bradley Jr. are both really, really excellent defenders. Each one has an argument maybe for tops of their own position, but you don't really know what you're going to get out of their bats. They've got other starters like Travis Shaw, who you don't really know what you're going to get. Ryan Braun has said that he doesn't even really plan on playing in 2021. So yeah, I have my concerns about the Brewers' offense. I think even more so than I do with Cincinnati's. But yeah, they're another team where you can see their pitching staff taking them a long way. Especially, I mean, any team in baseball would give a lot to have either Devin Williams or Josh Hader in the back of their bullpen, and Milwaukee has them both, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, I mean, you could make an argument they have to, if you go by any bullpen's top two guys, like that's probably the best bullpen in baseball just based off of their two back arms. Moving on to the Cardinals, man, they're a team. I have trouble getting excited about the Cardinals. I know they brought in Nolan Arenado, and that should be exciting. And I mean, Jack Flaherty's great. Goldschmidt's probably still got something left in the tank. They've got some young bats in the outfield, like O'Neill and Dylan Carlson. Harrison Bader's been, I don't know if he's still considered young guy. He's been around up and down a little bit at this point. I think they're kind of in a similar spot for different reasons than the Brewers and Reds could go either way with this team. And I think probably a good bit of it depends on, was that Goldschmidt bounce back real? Is Arenado healthy, and who is he healthy outside of Coors? And plus, what do they have, I guess, in their young corner outfield bats? Do you see any reason to believe in the Cardinals any more than anybody else in the division?
Not, head and shoulders above anybody else. No, I'm not really in on Bader or O'Neill contributing significantly in the outfield. I like Dylan Carlson a lot in the right, but I think their outfield's going to really struggle at the bottom of the order. But they are sort of in the opposite position of the Reds, where they've got two guys in their lineup who could be superstars.
Mm-hmm.
Nolan Arenado is always on the verge of a 6 or 7 win, really MVP level season. Paul Goldschmidt was phenomenal last year. Yeah. I mean, he after he struggled a little bit at the start of the 2019 season, I think he ended up being worth like 2.2 or something like that. He almost got there again, got that exact same value again in only a third of the games in 2020, because he was just impossible to get out. So they've got two guys like that who can really, really carry the offense. And that's a big deal when especially in a division like this, that's going to be really close. It's a big deal if you have a couple of those guys who are able to carry the load. And Jack Flaherty in the rotation's the exact same way. He can, if you've got two guys like that in the lineup, and then that ace, through and through, pitching every fifth day, they've got more other good arms in the pen. They've got enough of a rotation, I think, to get by. Adam Wainwright is apparently just never going to age beyond like age 33. He's going to be 33 years old for the next 50 years. So I think they've got enough on the pitching side, and with their now 2 superstar players, both of whom they've acquired for not, comparatively not that much in the trade market in the last couple of years. I think they've got enough to sort of compensate for what they lack in their outfield.
Yeah, they have exploited the trade market the last couple off seasons, getting Goldschmidt and Arenado for less than you would think that you should get those players for.
I mean, Carson Kelly's a really good catcher for the Diamondbacks. He's going to be good for a long time, but Luke Weaver could still have a perfectly fine few years for them. But I mean, the Nolan Arenado trade was a complete joke. And
that one was completely bonkers. But I think in both trades they got the best player in the trade, which is
absolutely.
Yeah. So, but yeah, the one with the Diamondbacks definitely at least you could see it from the Diamondback perspective. So the Cubs and you wrote, I think it was back in January, an article on how if the Cubs are going to keep one of their core pieces around beyond this season, Bryant, Baez, Rizzo. It should be Rizzo. But so, and this is maybe like a last hurrah season for this Cubs core that kind of was like, I guess, the Theo Epstein team that they rebuilt for and then developed, and they won a World Series. I was surprised by projections believing in their offense more than I thought, more than I expected the projections to say. Do you think, outside of the NL Central kind of being a toss-up, do you think this Cubs core has like what it takes for one more run?
No, I don't. I mean, the rotation is really, it's bare bones now beyond Hendricks. That's a team where if a couple of guys in the rotation end up getting, any kind of significant injuries, it's going to be really hard for them to, pitch their way through the season. They do have guys like, even beyond Bryant and Rizzo and Baez, who are, have been studs for years, or at least, for parts of the last few years. Ian Happ had a really good year last year. David Bodie still has a good bit of potential. Wilson Contreras is still in Chicago, surprisingly. I really thought they were going to end up dealing him this winter, and they held on to him. They held on to a lot of their guys, aside from Kyle Schwarber. So, when you read what their front office has said, and listen to their beat writers talk about them, they are not committing to a full rebuild yet. They don't seem to have any plans to in the near future, even though Baez, Rizzo, and Bryant are all the ends of their contracts are all coming up next winter. I think Kyle Hendricks has 2 years left. Mm-hmm. Contreras has 2 years left. They're reaching the end of the line with a lot of these major contributors, or at least a major decision point with all of them. So I think that I wouldn't be surprised if they hit the crap out of the ball, because if you get 3 or 4 of those bats to break in the right direction, which they didn't do last year, if you get a few of those guys hitting, then you're going to have a really successful season at the plate. But it's hard for me to imagine them getting enough out of their pitching staff to outlast, especially in a really tight division, which should be a really tight division race. Yeah. It's hard for me to imagine their pitching staff outlasting, St. Louis and Milwaukee through September.
Sure. And then I don't want to pick on the Pittsburgh Pirates, because
let's pick on the Pittsburgh Pirates. Let's do that.
As an Orioles fan, I know what it's like to have your team picked on, for other than about a 6-year period, 5 to 6 year window, for 22, 23 years now. I know what it feels like. But is there any reason to watch the Pirates this season other than maybe Cabrian Hayes? Like, is there any other reason to watch them?
No, you don't have to. You don't have to. I mean, they got rid of anybody else who was going to be interesting to watch. They have other prospects that could be reaching the show in the next couple of years. If you have the capacity or however you do it to watch one of the Pirates minor league teams, I might recommend that, because guys like Travis Swaggerty and O'Neal Cruz and guys like that are going to be really fun if you can catch a double-A game or something like that. But no, I mean the Pirates at the big league level, they I'm interested to see how this new regime continues to move forward as far as their own pitching plans, because since they were so innovative 10 years ago and really seemed to do a great job at getting the most out of their pitchers, and then all of a sudden 5 years ago we're like completely behind the rest of baseball all of a sudden. So I think there's been a lot of turnover in the last couple of seasons there, and they are slowly beginning to catch up with the information that a lot of other teams have had for several years in terms of what kind of pitch sequence works, where to attack guys in the zone. And I'm interested to see if what their pitching approach looks like in 2021, and if they get any more breakouts this season, what those look like, and how they're getting the most out of those guys. But the Pirates are going to be a 58 win disaster, and it's going to be a bummer.
Yeah, the NL Central is basically 4 teams who are kind of like around 500. We'll see how it breaks, kind of thing, and then the Pirates, pretty much, and they're nowhere near. We know how it's going to break for the Pirates. It's just a matter of how bad it's going to be.
Yeah. It's four teams, like 4 guys like treading water, and then one guy just like found a 10-pound rock and just let himself sink to the bottom of the ocean. That's where the division is right now. That's a great summary. I don't think I could do better than that. Cool, man. Well, Tony, thanks for coming on, man. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
And as I said at the beginning, go check out Tony's stuff on Fangraphs. Support Fangraphs. Go check out his stuff on Red Reporter, on Twitter at _Tony Wolfe _, right?
I'd love to get the original at Tony Wolfe off of Twitter, because I don't think he's using it at all. But
that's an off thing with names, or like sometimes there are certain very specific blog names, and they don't have their exact blog name because somebody who signed up for a Twitter account in 2010 and tweeted once still has it.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll petition this Tony Wolfe to give you your name.
I'd love that.
All right. Well, that wraps it up. The 2021 NL Central preview. Thanks for listening.